Hello, bright souls. Welcome to the stream. I am talking tonight about the solar eclipse in Aries and the astrology for the United States. So, welcome to the stream. If you've not seen me before, my name is Pierre. I am a life path consulting astrologer, and I'm taking a little dip into mundane astrology tonight, and talking about the solar eclipse in Aries and the implications for the United States. So let me know if you can hear me. This is my first multi stream. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And if you um, want to follow me, I'm also on TikTok mainly and building up my following here on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. So I think I'll wait a little bit and let some people show up. But if you want to put a note in the chat and say hello, go ahead and do that, and I will get started soon. So, let's see. I think the first thing that I will do is I will put up the astrology chart for the eclipse and talk a little bit about eclipses while more people are showing up. Um, This is the solar eclipse in Aries. And because I'm talking about the United States tonight, I've set the location for this eclipse in Philadelphia, which is the same city that we have for the Sibley chart for the United States. Um, let's just talk a little bit about eclipses. So, as you may or may not know, which most people do know, that eclipses are, or the solar eclipse is when the moon aligns with the sun and the earth and blocks out the light of the sun reaching the earth. So, astrologically speaking, if the sun is your consciousness and purpose and, soul's direction and who you are on a personal level, and the moon is your instincts and your natural emotions, well, what's happening is the energies from conscious thinking and reality is dimmed for a while. So that brings more to the forefront your emotional instincts, your habits, what it is you do to get where you're going. So that's kind of what happens with eclipses. Now, the other thing is that these eclipses happen only when they are near the points where the moon crosses the path of the sun. So, in a sense, eclipses help you and help us and help countries, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, get in back on path or get back in alignment with your true path. So, you're on a path, and as you go and explore things, sometimes you get far from it. Well, the eclipses are like portals where you can suddenly have endings or beginnings that are not in alignment with your path. Um, Now, I have a few notes here talking about the North Node. So, the North Node is just the path on the ecliptic that is more in the northern hemisphere, where the sun crosses the ecliptic, because the moon is about 5 degrees off of the solar path. And so that's why you see the moon in different places. And some people don't understand that, but but that's why it goes at an angle to the sun's path. And so it only passes in one spot, connects to the ecliptic in one spot in the northern hemisphere and one spot below the equator, and that's the south node. So we've got the north node right now in the tropical sign of Aries, and we have the south node in the tropical sign of Libra. And so the north node is, I'm just going to try to cover this pretty generally, but the north node is kind of this craving, this place of craving and activation. It's the place that's leading you forward along the path, and the south node is more like the past, the things that we're comfortable with. It's the place of dispersal and spiritualization. So in this case, with the north node in Aries, Aries is about passion and leadership and individuality and standing out alone. It's also sort of a place of entrepreneurial um, effect. And the Libra is about relationships and diplomacy and you know, peacemaking. And sometimes in the negative, Libra can be about people pleasing too much and that kind of thing. So when you have the North Node in Aries, you're looking at going towards um, more independence and leaving behind that people pleasing and toxic kind of relationship behavior. And there's kind of more of a sense of what you wanna do and strike out on your own. So that's kind of like the general overview of, the North Node in Aries and the South Node in Libra. Um, and if you have any questions while I'm talking, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will try to respond to them as best I can. So let's see, where did I wanna go from there? Um So let's see. Oh, one of the first things that I wanted to talk about. So we have um the United States. Let me pull up a different let me pull up actually my software so that I can move the charts. So we have gonna share this. I think there we go. So let's look at the United States chart first. Um, the United States. All right, so this is the sort of generally accepted chart for the United States. It's called the Sibley chart. And that puts Sagittarius on the ascendant. And then what we have, I'm going to overlay the eclipse on the outside ring. Okay, so what we have is this solar eclipse. So the solar eclipse is a new moon. It's basically a super new moon, and that is happening in the fifth house of the United States. Um, so actually, let's start with that. So we're having the new moon in the fifth house of the United States. But what I wanted to first talk about, when we have an eclipse, it can be significant endings and beginnings. So, essence, for the US, there is probably some sort of ending and a new beginning in fifth house things. So, for mundane charts, the fifth house relates to the recreation for the people of the country. So, we're going to be looking at changes with respect to um, theaters, recreation, pleasure. We'll look at changes with respect to children, um, the birth rate in the United States, maybe even reproductive rights, sexual concerns. There could even be changes with respect to speculation, other types of social functions. The fifth house also covers the entertainment industry, which, we can see right now that things are being shaken up with respect to the entertainment world. So, right now, as the sun is being eclipsed, so the sun represents leadership or the king. So, there could even be, if we take out, I'm gonna talk about the leader of the country in a little bit, but let's just focusing on the 5th house. There could be the fall of some leadership in terms of recreate in the recreation or entertainment industry in the United States, because the sun is exalted in Aries. So that means the sun has rulership over Leo, which is again, the showy, creative sign. The sun in Aries is exalted because it's a really great environment for the sun where the king or head is, the leader. It's got passion and individuality, and when the sun is being eclipsed, its energy and light is being dimmed. So at that point, the light shown on the fifth house related to entertainment is is being dimmed, and so l- leaders tend to fall with eclipses and that kind of thing. Now, the moon relates to the people of the country. So, the people of the United States with this eclipse are probably for the next at least 6 months to a year, and probably even sort of longer in this cycle, are going to be focused on this area related to, children, sex issues, and maybe reforming the what we do for entertainment, reforming how entertainment occurs in the country. But before I go forward with talking about how the eclipse is impacting the United States, we already know there's going to be a new start with respect to the fifth house related to um, recreation and children, and birth rate is potentially going to be something. I want to look at another timing chart, which is called the secondary progressed chart. And let's see. The thing that's remarkable about this secondary progressed chart for the United States, I don't know why it says April 6th. Doesn't matter. Well, it kinda does matter, but so at the time of the eclipse, this is, approximate, it'll be in a couple of more hours on the 8th, but, um, what time is it going to be? I think, like, about 2 something. Stop. Let's just put it there. So, when we look at a progressed chart, a whole cycle of the sun and moon together is about 30 years. It's a 30-year cycle in a progressed chart, which takes each day after the birth. So for the United States, we use July 4th, 1776. Each day after the birth is counted as a day in the life. And so the United States has obviously had many progressed new moons, but as the sun travels around the chart, the moon moves the fastest. So every time there's a progressed new moon, it's a whole fresh start for um, a cycle for the country. And what we can tell when we talk about new moons, just like when we're looking at new moons um, in, just our monthly new moons, we always say that's the new moon is a new cycle, and then the full moon is the peak of the cycle, and the quarter moons are kind of changing points. Well, it so happens that right now, and in fact tomorrow when there's the eclipse, it's just the new moon is just going to come off of 19 degrees of Pisces and go into 20 degrees of Pisces. And what we can say about this new progressed moon for the United States is that there's a whole new 30-year cycle of concentrated focus on the homeland, because this is happening in the 4th house for the US. So we've just really come out of closing a cycle, and I think a lot of people probably also know that we have just ended our or ending, because 'cause we're still a few degrees from Pluto. We've just had our Pluto return, so that was the end of another cycle. So we've just had yet another repetition of a cycle, and then with the eclipse being, starting kind of a new moon in the 5th house, we're bringing in yet another, cycle end and cycle change. So there's a lot of change going on in the US. So here, what we have, the 4th house in the mundane chart, so the mundane chart having to do with countries or corporations or entities, has to do with the land. So there's going to be a whole new focus on land, landowners, workers, could be mines, buildings, the people. So the 4th house also represents the people, and in opposition to the leader, which for the United States is the 10th house would be like the president. So there's also this is also related to the weather, and you can see that, so perhaps for the next 30 years, there's going to be a lot more focus on home and perhaps even opposition to the leader. And maybe with the sun also being in the 4th house, maybe the leader, because the sun then also does represent the leader of the country. So maybe then the leader may have more interest again in the people and the land and home. Okay. So that was one thing that I wanted to show you with respect to the progress chart, because we as people, the moon represents the people in a country. So the people actually just had what is called the progressed lunar return. So that is another cycle that the people have closed out, and we've started a new cycle. The people of the United States, because the moon is in Aquarius in the 3rd house, are really interested in communication, travel, local travel, technology, so that's kind of like the essence of the people. They're interested in humanitarian interests and that kind of thing. But for the next while, we're going to be focused on compassion, and there could be some illusion for the people over the next 30 years as well, but this Pisces is also about sacrifice and also ch- charity and spirituality, and perhaps actually helping the kind of people on the fringes, the downtrodden people. So I mean, hopefully that doesn't mean, you know, we're going to have a cycle of people living on the fringes. Hopefully that would be more people focusing on that area. So anyway, that's one of the interesting things, is that as we have this um new beginning in with related to the eclipse, so let's bring the solar eclipse back up. We're also having a progressed new moon. So I think that that's very significant, because when you have repetitions in astrology, that makes the brand new start even that more impactful. Okay, so let's see. One other thing, let's talk about a little bit before I start really diving into the chart. Let's talk about what this eclipse is. So each eclipse has it's assigned to a certain series. So this eclipse series started, it's called Saros Series 8 North. And so each eclipse has different series. I have a video on TikTok where I explain about the Saros series of eclipses. And so each eclipse has a certain flavor, and every time they occur, the placements aren't exactly the same, but they can be sort of similar. And so I get this information from this book called Predictive Astrology by Bernadette Brady. And at least until I think 2050, she's kind of interpreted these eclipse series. So this eclipse series started on it started at the North Pole. So eclipses start at either pole. They either start at the North Pole or the South Pole. And each time there's an eclipse, it kind of winds down um, the the Earth until it reaches the other pole. And I believe that total solar eclipses only occur when it's more around the middle of the Earth, closer to the equator. So anyway, this eclipse originally started May 17th, 1501, and it ends June 23rd, 2745. So this one has a ways to go now. And one of the what she says about this eclipse is that inventiveness and flashes of genius are the hallmark of the Sorrow series. The individual, and so this is more for individuals, the individual will have intuitive leaps, insights, good ideas, visions, or vivid dreams. This newfound inspiration will pull the person away from his or her social life or relationship, thereby causing strain in the private life. This is a time when the person needs to be free, if only for a few weeks. So, that's kind of the flavor of this eclipse, and I can see where it talks about inspiration because you have this Uranus-Jupiter conjunction, and we're talking about sort of going out as an individual and maybe to the detriment of your relationships because we have the South Node in Libra, where we're just sort of spiritualizing and refining relationships, and we have this craving towards independence, individuality, passion, and that kind of thing in Aries. Okay, so now we know that we have this eclipse is Saros series 8 North. But let's look at some of the aspects of it. So again, just like I just mentioned, Aries is about pioneering, passion, individuality, being a warrior, leadership. Sometimes it can be impulsive, competitive, entrepreneurial, independent. And on the North Node, there's an activation of those issues. And when the sun is blocked out during this period of time where the moon is eclipsing it, so that now or we're going to be more in touch with our internal nature, our habits, our emotional responses. Emotions can be heightened. There can be a discovery of things that have been hidden about those areas, about what we need to be independent, how we want to go forward, what we want to go after. And the thing is, we have to be careful around the North Node because it can overactivate. All right, so let me bring back up the US chart because I did say that this stream would be about the US and the solar eclipse. Okay, so one of the first things, wait, let me just make sure. So I talked about the progressed new moon. Okay, so I talked about how the US is has exactly just started a progressed new moon where we have a new 30-year cycle of focus on the homeland and the people, at least right now, for the next few months before the progressed moon gets to the fifth house. And that could be actually when a lot of these eclipse issues are even more amplified when the progressed moon gets to the fifth house. But the people are really going to be focused on home, land, resources, and also these issues around what people do for recreation, children, and perhaps reproductive rights. So these are probably the intense focuses for the next while here. Um, let's see. Yeah, so there's really going to be an activation in those areas and potentially an emotional focus. Now we have also Chiron, which is a well, I think they call it a centaur, but it represents both wounding and healing. And you can see that Chiron here is at 19 degrees exactly in conjunction with the sun and the moon. So this eclipse could bring up some old issues for the United States related to children. And I really think a lot of these things that are going on with the entertainment industry, because that does relate to the fifth house. A lot of the sort of hidden and painful things that are related to that are coming up. And then with Chiron, you have the pain, and then you can also have healing. So this eclipse can be kind of the start of identifying what's going on and how we're going to have a new start with regard to what we do for recreation, what we do with respect to the birth rate, which is something that I think is dropping in the country, or with reproductive rights, that may be changing. So there's a lot of healing to be had, but could be crisis before that happens. The other thing about this eclipse for the United States is that, well, okay, okay, let me first start about let me go back to let's take each planet by itself. So the sun for mundane charts represents the leader. So the leader of the country, in this case, because the sun is exalted in Aries and it's conjunct Chiron, there can be a crisis and a dimming for the leader. You often can see these eclipses actually relate more to countries and leaders, and in the past, kings. So you could see the leader of the United States fall here. Some sort of crisis could happen, and then a fall for the leader. Often these eclipses um precede let's say changes of leadership, significant changes of leadership, especially in Aries, because Aries is a leadership sign. The other thing for me, because the moon is eclipsing the sun, is that perhaps the people in the United States come forward more and heal their own wounds related to these fifth house areas that I mentioned before. And you see that because the eclipse is at 19 degrees, there's some kind of dredging up of those wounds. And then I think at 20 degrees, we look at potentially having a crisis shortly after this before we get into the healing. And because Mercury is retrograde, in Aries, and it is actually going to travel back over this 19 degrees. It's going to go over the 20 degrees Chiron. So the there could be a lot of news and communication about these fifth house entertainment issues, and I told you there could be a lot of reporting uh about these crises in terms of birth rate, entertainment, what we do for pleasure, um, theaters, the arts, and some sort of independence in those areas. And as Mercury retrogrades back, it's going to pick up on whatever started off with this eclipse before it's able to go back forward again. And in fact, I do believe that when Mercury stations forward again, it's going to be exactly on this nodal point at 15 degrees. I would have to look to make sure, but I think that's what I remember. Let's see. The people of the United States with this eclipse could be getting in touch more with what they need for joy. Um, let's see, Mercury retrograde. Um, then Venus is here in the fifth house. So there that increases the emphasis on the need for pleasure and entertainment and diplomacy. And the thing that I find interesting, I'm only just now getting into degree theory, but this eclipse is at 19 degrees, which I believe is a Libra degree. So even though we have the eclipse in Aries, opposite the things we're releasing in Libra, we also have the ruler of Libra here, which is it's in detriment, but I think that emphasizes that what we need to remember is that while we're trying to do our own individual thing, um we need to remember also our relationships. So there really is a balance needed. And some of this, for me, a lot of the things with the progressed new moon in the fourth house, where we're bringing our energy back into our country, the homeland. That's also what this north node in the fifth house, as opposed to the 11th house, related to, in some sense, related to the country's friends. We're kind of needing to come focus here on our own creative things. I think this house also relates to sort of like the people's representatives, I think in sort of the UK, it's parliament, or not parliament, but the House of Commons or something. It's the people's house. So here it would be the House as opposed to the Senate, who make recommendations to the leadership. So there is more of the I feel with Pluto also moving into Aquarius finally towards the end of this year. Um and all of the new moon, the eclipse down here, and the progressed new moon in the fourth house, it's more of a focus on home and the people's power. Now, one of the concerning things about this, we do have the ruler of the eclipse, because the eclipse is in Aries, the ruler of the eclipse is Mars. So, one of the things about this is that whatever progress and changes or new beginnings are happening with respect to the fifth house issues could be delayed. One, because Mars is in a water sign, um, Pisces, which is dispersing the energy. So that's one reason. Two is because we have Mars here conjunct Saturn. Um, so so while we want to push forward in a Mars way, Saturn's there to restrict. So at first, we can find that any advances that we're trying to make in the fifth house issues related to, again, I'll repeat, children, recreation, what we do for with respect to the birth rate, reproduction rights, education, even in some sense, that can be restricted. And at the same time, I think after the initial restriction, then there'll just be a lot of serious work that goes into it. And I think that some of the things that will have to be considered is how we do this with compassion and, bringing in the fringe and that kind of thing. Now, the other thing with this eclipse, when we have Mars and Saturn on the homeland. So in in mundane astrology, Mars represents the military, soldiers, war, um, industrial disputes, strikes, conflicts, opposition forces. It can also represent fire, and that kind of thing. And so when we have that in what represents the land, and then also Saturn can represent the elderly, um, epidemics, landowners, farmers, mines. So there seems to be some sense of still unrest in the homeland, basically. So that's still going on. And when you talk about um, the military and strikes and that kind of thing here, that's mimicked in the sixth house where we have Jupiter and Uranus. Um, the sixth house can relate to, among other things, workers and employees and trade unions. So there could be some sudden rebellion by the workers and employees of the United States, or there could be some influx of, Jupiter relates to foreign things. So maybe there really is going to be more foreign workers, or maybe um, could be more tech work, or maybe more internet work, or more even work from home, even though a lot of companies are trying not to do that. But this could also be an increase in strikes and oppositions. The other thing the sixth house relates to is public health, sickness, epidemics, military. So there could be some expansion with respect to those topics. Something sudden happens here in the next 6 months to a year. That's another thing that we could look at. And let's see, rebellion, right? There's also, with respect to Jupiter, there's something about there could be some sort of scientific medical breakthroughs as well with respect to that. Or let's see, and even something around um religion, um that I don't know, that somehow works its way into, the common people. The other thing about Saturn in the fourth house is we can see Saturn also relates to the sorrow of the people. So there could be some sadness going around for the United States people as well. And we still have Neptune transiting the fourth house of the United States. And that could also it's kind of like, Neptune is full of illusions. So Neptune's at 28 degrees. It won't be fully into Aries until next year, 2025. So we could still have some sense of this pulling the wool over the eyes of the people. But I think that transit's almost over. So this is I mean, again, there still looks like conflict and um, authority here in the homeland. And we also can have, since these two malefics are here in Pisces, we can also have a lot of things going on with the water. Perhaps, we've already seen um, waterway accidents. This Mars conjunct Saturn can also talk of collision, some sort of crisis, some sort of it could even be fire with structures or other types of water damage. Lots of watery weather can also be associated with this. And let's see. I mean, I think I already talked about Pluto as well. Um, yeah, so that's basically all I wanted to say. I'm about 45 minutes right now. I don't see any questions. Um, but do let me know if you have any questions. If you are interested, I do offer private readings. And let me see. You can book a consultation here at pzastrology.com. I do like to do a lot with transits and just helping you identify cycles in your life, just like I'm identifying the cycles for the United States. Follow me on TikTok at PZ Astrology or Peer Astrology. And I will talk to you soon. Good night.